Script Debugger helps you analyze the behavior of your script. You can explore the result. You can look in the event log, and you can explore each of the results that comes back from a scriptable application there. But sometimes that's just not enough for you to understand whether your script is behaving correctly or to figure out why it's not behaving correctly. For that, you need Script Debugger's Debug Mode. Debug Mode is a mode, and it belongs to the script. To turn on Debug Mode for a script, choose Script, Enable Debugging. Most of the time, you'll just click this switch in the toolbar. Notice how the interface changes. Extra buttons appear in the toolbar, such as Step Over, Step Into, and Step Out. The gutter becomes wider, and little arrows appear, showing you the executable lines where you can put a breakpoint. In the Resultant Variables tab, two extra panes appear, the Call Stack and the Breakpoints Inspector. Debug Mode is all about allowing you to pause your script in the middle of execution. To see what I mean, I'll start debugging this script. Instead of clicking Execute, I'll click Step Over. The script is now paused at the first executable line. You can tell we're paused because the Execute button now says Resume, and because it says Paused in the status bar, and because there's a green arrow showing where we are in the script. This is the line that is about to be executed. You can proceed and then pause again using a combination of Step Over, Step Into, and Step Out. Step Over means proceed to the next executable line. I'll click Step Over. We've proceeded to the next executable line and we're paused before it. Again, I'll click Step Over. We've proceeded to the next executable line and we're paused before it. Now there's a repeat block coming up, and that means we're going to go through the same line again and again and again, and I don't want to do that, so I'm going to use another way of proceeding and then pausing called Execute to Here. So after the repeat block, I'm going to Control-click in the gutter and choose Execute to Here. So now we've proceeded past the repeat block, and again we're paused just before the line after the repeat block. Now Step Over would mean proceed to the next executable line. But there's a handler call in this line. Let's say I want to dive into this handler. For that, use Step Into. Step Into means proceed into the handler call that occurs in this line and pause at the beginning of that handler. I'll click Step Into. Now I could use Step Over to continue my way through this handler. Step Over, Step Over. But let's say now I want to proceed out of this handler. Step Out means proceed until the handler that you're currently in returns, and then pause. I'll click Step Out. The other way to proceed and then pause is with breakpoints. A breakpoint is a mark attached to an executable line. If the path of execution reaches the breakpoint, execution will pause just before that line. To set a breakpoint on an executable line, click in the gutter. I'll set a breakpoint at this line. Now all I have to do is say Execute. We've proceeded to that line and paused there. Now I could click Resume, and if the path of execution encounters another breakpoint, we'll pause there as well. Breakpoints take priority, so the Step Over, Step Into, and Step Out commands will try to do the thing they normally do, but if in doing those things the path of execution encounters a breakpoint, we'll pause at the breakpoint. If you have a lot of breakpoints, it's useful to be able to disable some of them. Control-click on a breakpoint and choose Disable Breakpoint. To re-enable the breakpoint, Control-click and choose Enable Breakpoint. Alternatively, you can disable the entire breakpoints mechanism. Click Breakpoints in the toolbar. Now breakpoints simply aren't working at all until you click Breakpoints in the toolbar again. Alternatively, choose Script, Break on Breakpoints. If Break on Breakpoints is checked, the breakpoints mechanism is operating. Now, so far I haven't said anything about why you'd want to pause your script in the middle. The main reason is so that you can look at the values of variables. For example, I'll set a breakpoint here in the middle of this repeat block. Now I'll execute, and we're paused at the breakpoint. The Variables pane shows the value of all variables that are in scope at this point at this moment. For example, right now, names is an empty list. But if I click Resume, I loop around the repeat, pause at the same breakpoint, and now one item has been added to the names list. If I click Resume again, I've looped around again, and another item has been added to the names list. For an even better view of this process, I can double-click Names to open an Explorer window. The Explorer window has the debugging controls, so I can execute. Now the third item has been added. Now I can execute. Now the fourth item has been added, and so on. You can do the same thing with local variables inside a handler, but only if they're explicitly declared local. I'll execute and pause at the breakpoint inside this handler. I'm seeing a lot of top-level global variables, but I don't see LL, the list that I'm supposed to have accumulated inside the handler. That's because I didn't declare it local. Aha! There it is. Now I can check to see whether LL is being formed correctly. If you're paused at a point where a handler has called a handler, the call stack shows the nest of handler calls. I've put a breakpoint inside this handler. Now I'll execute and pause at that breakpoint. The call stack shows the nest of handler calls. And if I click the name of a handler, I can see where I'm paused in that handler. We started at the top level of the script. In that line, we called longest identical. Inside longest identical, we called first n. And that's how we came to be paused at this breakpoint. The Variables pane shows the variables that are in scope in the handler that's selected in the call stack. Inside longest identical, there are variables like L and LL. Inside first n, there aren't. Another way to examine values in your script when you're paused is with an expression. An expression is any AppleScript expression that has a value. The expression will be evaluated when it's created and also every time we pause. For example, here I've got a script that isn't working correctly and I don't understand why. Maybe the problem is this call to length of shortest. To find out, I'll check the value returned by length of shortest L at the point where I'm paused in this script. To create a new expression, I click plus, double-click in the expression area, and type the expression. Hit return, and the expression is evaluated. 19. Is that the length of the shortest string in L? I'll double-click L. This looks like the shortest string. It's 19 characters long, so that's not the problem. The problem must lie somewhere else in the script. To summarize the basics of debug mode that I've shown so far, I'll debug this script which isn't working. First, I'll show you what the script is supposed to do. I've selected some tracks in iTunes. They all have names that start with the same phrase, Stabat Mater and a dash. After that phrase, I want to insert successive numbers. So it should go Stabat Mater dash 1, Stabat Mater. Stabat Mater dash 2, Cujus animam, and so on. To test the script without running the risk of messing up the names of the tracks in iTunes, I've commented out the final lines that actually make the change in iTunes. So I'm accumulating the proposed list of names in a variable, names. When I run the script, though, the list of names is not being created. Look, I'll show you. I'm getting a runtime error at this point. I'll put the script in debug mode. Let's see if I can figure out what's going on. The first 7 lines of the script are supposed to gather the names of the tracks as they stand now. Let's see if that's working correctly up to that point. I'll put a breakpoint and execute. I'm paused at the breakpoint. The names should now be in the names variable. Yep, that looks okay. The next thing that happens is we call the handler longest identical. It's supposed to extract the longest identical phrase from the beginning of all the strings in this list. That would be Stabat Mater space dash space. I'll step one line and see whether S is being set correctly. Nope. S is coming back as missing value. So there's something wrong in my call to longest identical. The way longest identical works is it looks at the list of strings to see if all the strings are identical. And if they're not, it lops off the last character of all the strings and looks to see if all the strings in that list are identical, and so on. The first few lines inside the repeat block are supposed to create a truncated version of all the strings in the list. That truncated version goes into a new list, LL. I'll pause after the repeat block and see whether LL is being created correctly. I'll have to stop the script and begin over again. I'll execute, and we're paused at the first breakpoint. I'll execute again, and we're paused at the second breakpoint. Now I can examine LL. It looks good. All the names of all the songs have been reduced to the same length. 19, the length of the last item in the list. So I'll resume, and let's see what LL is next time through the loop. Good. All the strings are 1 character shorter. Let's try it again. Good. All the strings are 1 character shorter again. Good. Good. Whoa, something's gone wrong. We've now reached a list in which all the strings are identical, but we're not returning from longest identical. What's supposed to make us return from longest identical is this call to all identical. That's the test to see whether all the strings in the list are identical. All the strings in this list are identical, so why isn't all identical returning true? To find out, I'll step into all identical. Now I'm paused inside all identical. The first thing that happens is we grab the first item of L and use it as a model to compare against all the other items in the list. I'll step over this line. What's model? Model looks fine. I don't understand it. I'll click step over to get to the next line. The next line compares S and model and returns if they're not equal. Wait a minute. I see the problem. Model and S aren't equal. Model is the string Stabat Mater and a dash. S is this item 1 of list thing. I know what the problem is. Instead of S being item 1 of this list, it needs to be the actual value of item 1 of that list, Stabat Mater and a dash. To make that happen, I need to say contents of. I'll stop the script, insert contents of. I'll disable all my breakpoints because now I'm feeling very confident. I'll execute the script. The script executes successfully. I'll look at the names list, and sure enough, the correct numbers have been inserted. I fixed the bug.